We offer you deep historical information from history on YouTube channel. Subscribe. Now don't forget to turn on notifications. Hashshashis sacrifices, lurking in the shadow of Alamut. The Hashshashis were a religious sect and political organization belonging to the Nizari Ismaili branch of Shia Islam that operated in the Middle East from the 11th to the mid-13th century. Founded by Hassan bin Sabah and centered in Alamut Castle, this mysterious group has left an important mark on history with its political assassinations and Fedayeen culture. Origin and history of the Hashshashis. The history of the Hashshashis begins with the ideas of Hassan bin Sabah, who opposed the political and religious authority of the Fatimid caliphs in the 11th century. Sabah captured Alamut Castle in order to seize the leadership of the Nizari Ismaili sect and establish his own theocratic state. Since then, the Hashshashis have become an effective power in the Middle East, centered on Alamut and other fortresses. The world of belief of the Hashshashis. The belief system of the Hashshashis is based on the teachings of the Nizari Ismaili sect. These teachings give importance to superstitious interpretations and esoteric wisdom. The Hashshashis believed that the imams were spiritual leaders and carried divine light. They also had a philosophy based on reincarnation and metaphorical interpretation, political assassinations, and Fedayeen. The Hashshashis are known for their use of political assassinations as a political tool. The Fedayeen culture was developed by Hassan bin Sabah, who ensured that the Fedayeen carried out their duties with religious fervor and without fear of death. These Fedayeen received special training in Alamut and achieved great success in their assassination attempts. The influence and legacy of the Hashshashis. The Hashshashis have been an important force influencing the political and religious balance in the Middle East. Their assassinations and mysterious cults led to the Hashshashis becoming legendary in Europe and the origin of the word assassin. The Hashshashis' libraries and scientific studies in Alamut also constituted one of the most important intellectual centers of the period. Misinformation about the Hashshashis. There are many misinformation and legends about the Hashshashis. The most common one is that their name is linked to the use of hashish. This is propaganda spread by the opponents of the Hashshashis, and there is no evidence in historical sources to support this information. Sources about the Hashshashis. There are many historical sources and research on the Hashshashis. The most important sources include Marco Polo's travelogues, the Nizari texts found in Alamut Castle, and modern academic works on the history of the Hashshashis. The Hashshashis and popular culture. The Hashshashis, with their mysterious and Fedayeen culture, have been the subject of many novels, movies, and video games. Popular game series such as Assassin's Creed are inspired by the Hashshashis. The importance of the Hashshashis. The Hashshashis have an important place in the political and religious history of the Middle East. They left their mark on history with their mysterious cults, political assassinations, and bouncer culture. The Hashshashis' libraries and scientific studies in Alamut also constituted one of the most important intellectual centers of the period. Structure and organization of the Hashshashis. The secret order of Alamut. The Hashshashis had a hierarchically organized structure. At the center of this structure was the Nizari Imam, who was called the absolute authority, Sayyidna. The Imam was at the top of both religious and political authority and expected absolute obedience. Below the Imam were various levels of administrators, soldiers, and Fedayeen. Fedayeen system. Fedayeen, one of the most well-known characteristics of the Hashshashis, were elite soldiers who had undergone rigorous training. These Fedayeen would carry out political assassinations by acting with religious fervor and obedience. Although there is no precise information about the training methods of the Fedayeen, the legend of the bravery and obedience of the Fedayeen made the Hashshashis effective in psychological warfare. Da'iler, missionaries. The Hashshashis utilized missionaries called da'i to spread their beliefs and recruit followers. These da'i were usually chosen among highly educated and persuasive individuals. They spread Nizari Ismaili teachings and carried out propaganda activities against opposing forces such as the Seljuk Empire. Fidais, non-Feda soldiers. The Hashshashis were not only composed of Fedayeen. Regular soldiers, called Fidais, were also an important part of the Hashshashi army. These soldiers took part in the defense of castles and the protection of Hashshashi lands. Intelligence networks. The Hashshashis established an effective intelligence network to closely monitor their enemies and to ensure the success of their assassination plans. Thanks to this network, the Hashshashis had the opportunity to closely follow their targets and political developments. Alamut Castle, home of the Hashshashis. Alamut Castle, the most important center of the Hashshashis, was a solid fortress located at the foot of the Elbrus Mountains. Thanks to its naturally protected location and the defense mechanisms developed by the Hashshashis, the castle was almost impossible to capture. Library and Science Center. Alamut Castle was not only a military base, but also an important library and science center. The Hashshashis invited important scientists and philosophers of the period to the castle and conducted important studies in fields such as philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. These studies show that the Hashshashis were not only an organization of assassins, but also one of the important intellectual movements of the period. Symbolic importance. Alamut Castle was both a military headquarters and a religious symbol for the Hashshashis. According to the Nizari Ismaili belief, the castle represented the Garden of Eden. Therefore, the Hashshashis considered it a religious duty to protect Alamut and prevent its capture. The fall and end of the Hashshashis. The Hashshashis continued their existence as an important power in the Middle East until the middle of the 13th century. However, the Mongol invasion was an important factor that brought the end of the Hashshashis. In 1256, the Mongols, led by Hulagu Khan, besieged Alamut Castle and captured it after a long resistance. This event greatly weakened the political and military power of the Hashshashis. In addition to the Mongol invasion, the internal strife of the Hashshashis and the divisions within the Nizari Ismaili sect also contributed to the weakening of the organization. In the late 13th century, the recapture of Alamut Castle and the assassination of the Nizari Imam marked the end of the Hashshashis. The legacy of the Hashshashis is still a subject of debate and interest today. With their mysterious cults, political assassinations, and Fedayeen culture, the Hashshashis left their mark on history and became the subject of many legends. The legacy of the Hashshashis. The legacy of the Hashshashis is important not only politically and historically, but also culturally. The library and science center established by the Hashshashis in Alamut Castle became one of the most important intellectual centers of the period. The work of the Hashshashis in fields such as philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and mathematics contributed to the development of Islamic civilization. The Fedayeen culture of the Hashshashis has also been the subject of many works of literature and elements of popular culture. Video games, such as Assassin's Creed, and works such as Marco Polo's travelogues, have carried the legend of the Hashshashis to the present day. Controversies about the Hashshashis. There are many debates and different perspectives on the Hashshashis. While some historians see the Hashshashis as a political terrorist organization, many others see them as a religious and philosophical movement struggling to spread the Nizari Ismaili faith. The Hashshashis' assassination methods and Fedayeen culture have also been criticized and debated. While some consider these methods barbaric and immoral, others argue that they are necessary and legitimate for political purposes. The importance of the Hashshashis. The Hashshashis have an important place in the political and religious history of the Middle East. They left their mark on history with their mysterious cults, political assassinations, and bouncer culture. The library and science center established by the Hashshashis in Alamut Castle was one of the most important intellectual centers of the period. The work of the Hashshashis in fields such as philosophy, astronomy, medicine, and mathematics contributed to the development of Islamic civilization. The legacy of the Hashshashis is still a subject of debate and interest today. In addition to being historically and culturally significant, the Hashshashis are a thought-provoking example of complex concepts such as human nature and political ideologies. Additional information on the Hashshashis. The Hashshashis are thought to be the origin of the word assassin. In the Alamut castle of the Hashshashis, there was a garden that imitated the Garden of Eden. The Hashshashis experienced their heyday during the reign of Hassan II Alamut, the grandson of Hassan bin Sabah. In addition to Alamut Castle, the Hashshashis controlled areas such as Kuistan, Rudbar, and Girdku. Justification for assassinations. The Hashshashis viewed political assassinations as a legitimate political tool. This view was born out of Hassan bin Sabah's need to eliminate his political rivals in order to seize the leadership of the Nizari Ismaili sect and establish his own theocratic state. Target selection. The primary targets of the Hashshashis' assassinations were the political and religious leaders of the Seljuk state. Viziers, commanders, governors, and religious leaders were among the most important targets of assassination attempts. The Hashshashis aimed to increase their influence and authority by eliminating their political rivals. Assassination techniques. Although there is no precise information about the assassination methods of the Hashshashis, we can make some predictions based on historical sources and narratives. Secrecy and surprise. The most important element in the assassinations of the Hashshashis was secrecy and surprise. The Fedayeen would follow their targets for a long time, identify their weak points, and strike at the most appropriate time. These attacks were usually carried out in crowded places, or when the targets felt safe. Close combat. Close combat techniques played an important role in the assassinations of the Hashshashis. Fedayeen would neutralize their targets with weapons such as daggers, swords, and arrows. Use of poison. The possibility of the use of poison in the assassinations of the Hashshashis is also frequently mentioned. Assassinations may have been carried out using different poisons according to the possibilities of the period. However, the use of poison has not been conclusively proven. Psychological warfare. In their assassination attempts, the Hashshashis relied not only on physical force, but also on psychological force. They spread myths and propaganda to intimidate and frighten their targets. The impact of the assassinations. The political assassinations of the Hashshashis significantly affected the political balance in the Middle East. It contributed to the weakening of the Seljuk Empire and the strengthening of the Nizari Ismailis. In addition, the legend of the Hashshashis and their assassination methods aroused fear and curiosity in Europe. Controversies about the assassination methods of the Hashshashis. There are many debates and different points of view about the assassination methods of the Hashshashids. While some historians consider them barbaric and immoral, many others argue that they were necessary and legitimate for political purposes. Additional information on the assassination methods of the Hashshashis. The Hashshashis are thought to be the origin of the word assassin. This word is derived from the Arabic word Hashshashin, which means hashish user. The reason why this word is attributed to the Hashshashis is that Marco Polo gave false information in his travelogues that the Hashshashis used cannabis. The Hashshashis' Fedayeen culture was an important part of their assassination methods. Acting with religious fervor and obedience, the bouncers carried out their duties without fear of death. Although there is no precise information about the training methods of these bouncers, it is known that they were prepared for assassinations through rigorous training. The assassinations of the Hashshashis were used not only to eliminate political rivals, but also as a means of sending a message. Assassinations were used as a method to show the power and might of the Hashshashis and to deter their rivals. There are also many legends and stories about the assassination methods of the Hashshashis. These legends and stories have contributed to the Hashshashis' mysterious and frightening image. Sources on the assassination methods of the Hashshashis. Marco Polo, Sayahatnam Bernard Lewis, The History of Alamut Castle, Farhad Daftari, The Ismailis, Their History and Doctrines, Peter Willey, The Assassins, A History of Radical Islam, John Mann, The Assassins, A Radical Sect in Islam. Things to be aware of about the assassination methods of the Hashshashis. It is difficult to find precise information about the assassination methods of the Hashshashis. Information on this subject is obtained from historical sources and narratives. There are also many legends and stories about the assassination methods of the Hashshashis. These legends and stories may not reflect historical facts. It is important to consider different perspectives and historical context when analyzing the assassination methods of the Hashshashin. Controversies about the Hashshashid assassination methods. There are many debates and different perspectives on the Hashshashid assassination methods. While some historians consider them barbaric and immoral, many others argue that they were necessary and legitimate for political purposes. Conclusion: the assassination methods of the Hashshashids are one of the most mysterious and controversial topics in history. In order to understand the impact of these methods and their political consequences, it is important to have a detailed knowledge of the history and ideology of the Hashshashis. We offer you deep historical information from history on YouTube channel. Subscribe. Now don't forget to turn on notifications.